I'm a fan and an advocate for open access. I think it's right up there with the printing press and establishment of the internet in terms of importance and value to science and society. Thanks to open access content not being kept behind a paywall, it is no longer the privilege of wealthy institutions and countries.
Welcome everybody to the 49th episode of the Struggling Scientist podcast. We are a podcast by scientists, for scientists, anybody science adjacent, and perhaps even hobbyists. My name is Susanna and I'm here with my co-host Jaron.
Hi.
Today we're going to talk about open access publishing and we'll be talking about the history of publishing, why open access is so expensive for researchers and why it is so important. And to help us discuss this topic we have a very special guest, Chirag Patel.
Hey, Susanna and Jaron.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to our podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's very nice to have you here today. And we are, of course, very interested in the topic of open access publishing. But before we get started, would you like to introduce yourself a bit to our listeners? Like, who are you? What is your expertise? What do you do? Or anything else interesting that you might want our listeners to know?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Chirag Jay Patel. You can call me Jay. I work with Cactus Global for the past 2 years. I'm the head of sales and business development for the Americas. And yeah, I mean, I'm all about open access. I used to work for open access publishers many years ago, and of course, I use open access every day. It's fantastic, and I love seeing it grow every day by leaps and bounds, and especially how it's helping researchers with accessing information, but also helping researchers create new technologies such as AI and generative AI and all these other amazing things that people are talking about all over social media.
Yes, well, it's really nice to meet you. So let's jump right into our topic. Jaron.
Yeah, so our current publishing system was developed in I would say, quite different time period. A period when scientific journals were still sort of printed in universities, or people needed subscription to journals to really stay up to date with like the most current research. But do you think the system of publishing in that time period sort of made more sense given the constraints on publishing? Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I would say yes and no. Yes, because it was more costly to produce and distribute content before the internet. But also at the same time, no, because researchers, scientists, professionals, students, I mean, everyone at that time wanted access to information, but many were denied, due to these constraints of just, not being, a member of a specific organization or an institution, or not having the ability to travel to where all this information was kept.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I think also the paywall method came from that time, right? When you still really had to pay to get this like touchable paper in your hands. Do you think it still makes a lot of sense in our current time period with the large sums of money that have to be paid to see research, but that the researchers never really see?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think paywalls ever or never made sense. In reality, more access to information means that more people can work on solving problems. They can discover new ideas and improve old ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically the same thing that happened with the printing press, or the development of computers, or telecommunications, or internet. More people were able to access it, and more people were able to develop these cool new technologies. Otherwise, I think we'd all still be, writing on stone tablets. If people weren't allowed to share information, and realistically, if you put up a paywall, someone will find a way around it. There is no doubt in my mind that there are very smart and capable people out there that will find a way around every paywall that someone puts up. And at our Discovery, which is the free mobile app that we develop and provide to researchers, realistically anyone globally, we conduct user interviews quite frequently, and we ask them about their needs and challenges. And the one challenge that keeps coming up time and again is getting access to information. And, we ask them, well, how do you overcome paywalls? And they tell us that they ask peers, their former professors, the authors of the paper. Some of them go on social media and ask if somebody can provide the PDF. And of course, many end up finding their way to Sci-Hub, which is, which while it is illegal, it's also a really great resource for millions and millions of people who can't afford to pay exorbitant fees to access papers. And in honesty, very few people can, afford to pay the fees that publishers charge, unless you're lucky enough to be a part of an institution that can afford the licensing fee.
So maybe on the opposite end of something is illegal as Sci-Hub, but there's also open access, and this has been introduced quite a few years ago. Do you think that it effectively makes the paywall not really needed anymore? There's a lot of journals are not really hiding their content behind paywalls anymore. What do you think about this, relatively recent development of more and more papers becoming open access? And do you know what really led to the open access becoming more of a thing?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a fan and an advocate for open access. I think it's right up there with the printing press and the establishment of the internet in terms of importance and value to science and society. There are I would say there are a few things that led to open access. First of all, was or is still the serials crisis that that university libraries were facing at the end of the 20th century. They could no longer afford the ever increasing costs for providing access to publications to their to their members. Also, right around that time, the internet was coming into its own, and more people were being connected and finding new ways to share information. And this also coincided with the open source movement as that was gaining momentum. And so I think all those things kind of led us to scientists, researchers, academics, all demanding that open access be the new policy going forward.
And what do you think has been the biggest benefit of open access publishing so far over the years that it has been going on now?
Yeah, I mean, the single biggest benefit has been increasing the number of people who can have access to, STEAM content, basically science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics content that gets published or has been published. Now, I think thanks to open access content not being kept behind a paywall, it is no longer the privilege of wealthy institutions and countries. Also, open access has led to the growth in the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning and natural language processing, because these programmers and researchers now have so much more data, so much high quality data to train their computers and models to help people do things that were not possible previously or took too long and cost too much.
Now, obviously, that sounds like a really great benefit of open access, but I guess it's also not really perfect in that sense yet. Is there something you would like to see improve with open access currently in the current system?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always room for improvement, and if I were to pinpoint one thing that could be improved, would be while open access has democratized access to content, it's created an equity crisis when it comes to who can actually afford to publish their manuscript as open access. Many in the global south are still not able to afford the article processing charges that journals levy, and many of these journals are based in the global north. And I think there also needs to be better and more easily understandable waiver policies on the part of publishers. Definitely increased funding for scholars from the global south to afford to pay these APCs, and for more publishers and journals to be based in the global south.
Yeah, it's crazy expensive to publish open access. We recently did it, and it's, I think, 3,000 euros. Crazy.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, I definitely think, the affordability crisis is not just a global south issue. I think it's a global north issue as well.
Well, it of course has to come out of the grants that then in the end the taxpayers indirectly pay for again, which is maybe not completely fair, but
Yep.
Money has to come from somewhere.
That's right.
Are there any developments currently ongoing with open access? Has the open access publishing reached its final form, or is it still being developed and hotly debated?
You know what? I don't think open access has, really reached its final form. Not exactly a current development, but certainly something that came on the scene during the pandemic was the popularity of preprints. I mean, it started right around when I guess open access really came to the forefront, and really the granddaddy of preprints is Archives, which has been hosting physics papers, preprints for probably well over 20 years now. But as I mentioned, during the pandemic, preprinting really took off, and now it's growing very rapidly. I don't even know how many preprint servers there are anymore because a new one pops up almost every other day. But the great thing about preprints is there's no APC involved. Researchers can post their manuscript for free. Other scholars can read it for free, and no one has to pay until it gets published. But again, I think even after 20 years, open access is still hotly debated in some corners. Not everyone is convinced that OA is good, mostly due to the shifting of payments from the reader to the author. And, it also poses a threat to publisher revenues. And in all honesty, in order to address some of these concerns, there are many parties out there trying new business models for open access, everything from subscribe to open to transformative agreements to read and publish or publish and read are some of the new business models that are being tried out by various different parties.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. So we touched on this, of course, quite a bit, that open access is still relatively quite expensive for researchers to be able to publish their articles. Are you aware of what factors go into sort of deciding that open access fee? And do you think that this can negatively be impacting obviously the less wealthy countries, but also even the more Nordic countries that can afford these fees?
Yeah, so open access is of course free to read, but I think, as they say, there's nothing really free in life, and is there still a cost associated with producing the content?
Mm-hmm.
And having worked for publishers in the past, I do know that there are some fixed costs that a publisher incurs and must cover, such as labor, technology, sales, marketing, and communications are just a few of them.
Mm-hmm.
And really, the move to open access has created uncertainty for the publisher when it comes to revenue. In the subscription model, a publisher's knew how much revenue to expect based on how many subscriptions they sold or licenses they sold. But in an OA model, that's no longer the case. There is really no predictability, because in order to keep earning revenue, you have to keep acquiring more submissions and publishing more papers. So yeah, and again, I think the APC fees are certainly leading to inequity and negatively impacting scholars. Definitely in the global South, but I think as we just discussed, I think also in the global North. So yeah, I mean, eventually, I think something's going to have to be done to make open access more affordable.
I hope that they will figure something out in the future.
Yes, hopefully sooner than later.
Do you know if it's required for journals to provide an open access option, or is that not necessary?
I do not believe there's a blanket requirement for journals to provide an open access option, but many journals are starting to offer it as an option or launching open access specific journals. And I think that's, of course, maybe due to pressure from the market, but it's also due to the fact that if you're not playing the open access game, you're leaving money on the table, and publishers want to generate as much revenue as possible. But having said that, there is, of course, Plan S, and I think that has really supercharged the transition to open access by publishers. And basically, Plan S requires scientists to receive funding for Coalition S member organizations to publish papers so they are immediately free to read, and it has to be published under a liberal license. And I think that's, there's been a lot of pushback from publishers and even from institutions. But again, I think this is one of those evolutions of open access, that's pushing publishers to finally get into the open access game.
Is PlanS a relatively recent development? Are you aware of that? Or
I think it's been around for a couple of years. I know they were supposed to implement it in 2020, but I think it got delayed to 2021. But I think, and I think it's changed over time as far as what the requirements are.
I believe there's also
Yep.
some grants in the Netherlands where we are that require open access publishing. Yeah.
I think PlanS is changing how funders are providing grants to researchers. It's also changing how institutions are looking at where their researchers can and should publish based on funder requirements. And then it's also forcing publishers to, finally say, yes, we will offer open access, when in the past, many of them were saying, no, we're not going to do open access.
Now, as you highlighted before, you're working on the R Discovery app, which is the largest repository of open access journal articles in the world. What made you decide to work on this, and how is R Discovery helping further open access?
Yeah, so working on R Discovery, is a no-brainer for me. I mean, I've been an advocate for open access for over a decade, and this app is one of the best I've seen and used, so far. I also wanted to work on R Discovery because we want our users to have a fully organic user experience without advertising and introducing any sort of bias from our end or from our client's end. And when you use our app, you'll notice that open access papers are front and center in the home feed. OA allows us to deliver a better user experience. We can also do a lot more cool things with OA papers, like creating highlights and summaries using AI. And to date, we've generated over 6 million AI summaries that are accessible in the app. And really, our goal is to help our users, discover, access, and read the research they need when and where they need it, and to reduce, a lot of the barriers that currently exist in the system.
And that's interesting, because I was sort of thinking, like, obviously we're talking about the problem of accessing papers, but on the other hand, now we also have so many papers to stay on top of that it's super handy to have a tool like this that really helps you funnel the most important papers that you need.
Yep, exactly. And as I said, because we don't do any advertising or sponsorship, the papers that get recommended to the users are purely based on the topics that they choose to follow. And as they engage with more articles on the platform, we're able to provide better and better recommendations back to them.
Yeah, I have been trying it now for a couple of months, of course, and I really, really love it. It's like you can just scroll through all these papers. Indeed, these summaries are great. You can just see the main points of the papers immediately. And I really love just casually scrolling to my list of papers, basically. Feels very social media-like also.
Yeah, and we wish we could do a lot more summaries and highlights for more papers. It's just there's still some restrictions that exist, even within the open access space. I mean, you have open access papers that are free to read and free to use and do with as you please. But then there are also restrictive licenses of open access where you can, view it, download it, and read it, but you can't reuse it. So we're hoping that licenses get more liberal over time, so we're able to do a lot of these cool things like create AI summaries and highlights. And who knows, down the line, maybe we might do text to audio, or use AI for translation. So, I mean, these are all the things that are on our roadmap, and I think open access will really help us do a lot of those cool new things.
Yes, for sure. So if our listeners are interested in checking out R Discovery, where can they find this?
Yeah, so I mean, R Discovery is a free app that your listeners can download from the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. And we are currently working on putting the app into to other app stores as well. But those are probably the two primary places that you can find it. So have a play around with it. We love getting user feedback, positive or negative, and it really helps us improve the platform. Yeah, so have a test and let us know what you think.
Yes, if people search also on the strugglingscientist.com/ our discovery, you get it immediately sent to the right Play Store or App Store on your phone.
No, that's great.
Yes. It was really nice to have you as a guest, and we learned a lot about open access, so we want to thank you for that, of course.
Oh, yeah.
If our listeners have any questions, suggestions, comments, or papers we really need to read, you can reach out to us via our website, thestrugglingscientist.com. You can also check out our website for some really cool science-inspired merch and to sign up for our awesome Journal of the Struggling Scientist, aka our newsletter. You can also follow us on social media. Jaron, which ones do we have again?
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn.
Wow.
Yeah. And Mastodon.
Mastodon. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care.